Hi, book club. I'm coming to you today from home because I didn't have time to do the lecture this last week. It just got really busy for me. So hopefully you guys are doing okay and you're able to follow along with the book as we read. I know it's challenging, but I still see a lot of people at book club each meeting, so that's really great. I'm very proud of you for hanging in there and continuing to read the book. So let's talk about stave 3 or chapter 3. You can probably guess what's going to happen next. Another ghost is going to come to visit Scrooge. And the first ghost, of course, which we talked about last week, was the ghost of Christmas past. And then it naturally follows that the ghost this time is the ghost of Christmas present. So Scrooge wakes up on the next night knowing that another ghost is coming. So he doesn't disbelieve anymore. He believes that things are happening, that another ghost is going to come. So he's awake at 1 o'clock, waiting for the spirit, but the spirit doesn't come into his room. And all of a sudden, Scrooge notices a light coming from under his door. So he gets up to investigate, to look around. And he goes out into his, what we would call, living room, and he sees the spirit sitting there. Now, Scrooge was, even though he tried to prepare mentally for what might be coming, he thought it could be something strange because the first ghost was pretty strange looking. He was still surprised by what he did see when he opened the door to his living room. He saw the ghost, and the ghost was wearing a green robe with white fur and had brown curly hair. But there wasn't just the ghost. There was a whole lot of other stuff in the living room with the ghost. All things sort of representative or representing the holidays. So there was all kinds of food, and it was decorated with holly and evergreen and mistletoe. And there was all kinds of light and a very big fire. And of course we know that Scrooge doesn't like to spend money to light big fires for himself. So this is pretty unusual. And it says that the hearth is a part of a fireplace, had never known a fire that big, either with Scrooge or with Marley. And then the ghost invited Scrooge to come in and meet him. So Scrooge enters and the ghost says, "I am the ghost of Christmas present." And the interesting thing I think about this part, when the ghost introduces himself, is that this time, Scrooge doesn't try to fight it. He actually says, "Please take me and show me things. I want to learn another lesson. I feel like I learned a lesson last night. I feel like that lesson has already benefited me, started to do good things for me. I want to learn something else." So Scrooge again held on to the spirit, took his robe so that they could go to the first place that they were going to go. And they went basically out into the street, and there was a very long description, a couple pages worth, describing how people were preparing for the Christmas holiday. Most of which was people, going out and buying the things that they needed to make their holiday meal. So there were people going to the baker, people going to the butcher, people getting the things that they needed for their Christmas dinner with their family. So they were out in the street and they saw all of that. And as the spirit was watching these people, he took his torch, and torch is like a stick with fire coming out of it. You might know that the Statue of Liberty in New York holds a torch in her hand. That's also a torch. But this torch kind of has magic. So this torch gives people a feeling of well-being, happiness. You might even say the Christmas spirit. So he touches people with his torch in order to give them this good, positive feeling and to make their holiday seem happy. And interestingly, he says that he mostly does this for the poor because the poor need it the most. And after they've had this conversation, they've looked at general people walking around and buying their supplies. The spirit decides to take Scrooge to his clerk's house. Clerk is the man that works for Scrooge. And remember, his name is Bob Cratchit. So they go to Bob's house, and they notice that the family's preparing for Christmas, but they notice that, like, everyone is wearing clothes that are obviously older and fairly worn, but they've tried to make them look nicer by adding ribbons and things which were not expensive. And the family is obviously all getting ready. They're all participating in preparing the house for the holiday, for their father, Bob Cratchit, to come home. Their sister comes home from working. She lives and works away from the house in order to help the family with money. And finally, the father, Bob Cratchit, comes home with Tiny Tim. And Tiny Tim is a very important figure in this story. He is Bob Cratchit's son, and in this story they use the word crippled. They don't really say what's wrong with him, but basically he has to use a crutch, which is a thing that goes under your arm and helps you walk when you have something wrong with your legs. So Tiny Tim has some sort of issue that does not allow him to walk easily, and he needs a crutch. And he's also very small. He's not the healthiest child in the world. But his spirit is really just beautiful. So he had been at church with his father, and Tiny Tim said that he was happy that the people at church could see him so that they could think about the stories of related to Christmas about how lame beggars, lame means people who have a hard time walking, were made to walk. So he sort of has this really nice spirit. He's a very kind little boy. And that's not surprising because his family is all very kind as well, including Bob Cratchit. So after they come home, we see the celebration of the dinner. And for all of these people, there's a lot of children. There are a lot of children in the family and the two parents. There's a goose, which is rather small. And they get to the end of the dinner, and they discover, we had a big goose this year. We didn't eat it all. And all that was left was this one tiny little bone or piece of the bird. And then the mom, Mrs. Cratchit, went out to get the pudding, which was British pudding is strange. It's like a ball, and they set it on fire, and then you eat it. I don't know. Go ask Nigel Kaplan about British pudding. I don't know anything about it. But at any rate, she brings it in, and it's smaller than you would expect for a family of this size. And so over and over, we're kind of seeing repeated this idea that this family does not have a lot, okay? But yet, they never complain. They don't say, oh, this pudding is so small. Oh, this goose was too small. I'm still hungry. In fact, there's a part that said it would have been heresy to do so, which means really just unthinkable. They would not say that. And you can probably guess why that is. Perhaps they didn't want to make their father feel bad about not having a lot of money. And then they sat down after dinner to have a drink. And the whole family, there were, two parents and multiple children, had 3 glasses between them. 3. So they all had to share. And that was all of the glass they had in their household. And when they sat down, the first thing that Bob Cratchit did was give a toast, cheers, to Ebenezer Scrooge, which seems odd because Scrooge does not pay him very well, he does not treat him very well, but yet, of course, he is the person that gives money to their family, however little money it might be. And the reaction of the family to this is very interesting. They're not happy. They're kind of like, they don't really want to thank Scrooge. But Bob Cratchit, the father, insists and says, no, it's Christmas. We must thank him. We must be thankful for what we have. And then after seeing this scene at the Cratchit's house, the spirit takes Ebenezer Scrooge around to various locations around the world in kind of miserable circumstances where people are either alone or it's very cold or they're very poor, and yet still they are celebrating the holiday, even if it's in a very small way. So this is kind of to say to him, look, these people who have nothing are still celebrating, whereas you who have all this money choose to ignore this holiday and to be mean, basically. So after that, they go to see his nephew, who had come to invite him to the dinner, and to see what's happening at that dinner. And in fact, even at this party, people are talking about Scrooge, and they're talking about the fact that he did not agree to come to this dinner. And his nephew has an interesting point. He says, I can't be angry at my uncle, Scrooge. I'm going to continue to invite him to these things. Maybe someday he'll decide he wants to come or be moved to do something nice for his clerk. But he says, really, the only person he's hurting is himself. So his nephew is wise enough to see, okay, this really, he's not trying to hurt me. What he's really actually doing is hurting himself, because here I am having a lovely Christmas dinner with my friends and my family, and Scrooge is off alone, cold, and probably hungry. So really, he's only hurting himself by saying no to continue with this. So they stayed at his nephew's house for quite some time, and just watched the fun that the people were having. And then the spirit decided to take him away after they had played a few games, and in which one of them, Scrooge was sort of the joke. They made jokes about Scrooge, which probably doesn't surprise you. So they get back to his room, and Scrooge notices that the spirit now looks older than he did in the beginning. What I take away from this is the spirit really only lives one night. There's like a different spirit every year. And when they get back, he draws Scrooge's attention to something that is beneath his robe or his jacket or his cloak. And when he opens it, there are these two children who are very, very thin, dirty, poor, and sad. And he says that the two children belong to mankind, and that their names are Ignorance and Want. Okay? Ignorance, you can probably guess from the meaning of ignore. Ignorance is to not have knowledge of something, but almost purposefully, so you don't want to know something. And want, obviously, is want. So he's saying mankind has created these two children through its actions. And Scrooge asks the spirit, well, why can't we do anything for these children? Don't they have anywhere to go? And the spirit takes Scrooge's own words and gives them back to him and says, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Which is exactly what Scrooge said in the very beginning of the story when the two men came asking for money for charity. So this concept of having taken Scrooge's own words, things that he said at the beginning, this spirit, the spirit of Christmas present, used those words against Scrooge in this situation and said, look, here's the reality. Here's what you have said. And this is what's going to happen if you continue on this path. What's going to happen is that Tiny Tim is going to die, okay? You are going to continue to be alone. And these children, ignorance and want, are going to lead to the end, okay? The end of what we just have to guess, okay? So we've had the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present. You can probably guess what's going to come next. Okay, so tune in next week for Stave 4, the last of the spirits, and we'll see what happens. And sorry for getting this to you late, and I hope you enjoy book club this week. Thanks, guys.